Hello, this is Crispin Flintoff from Not the Andrew Marr Show. Before this video starts, I'd just like to ask if you'd subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we will be covering the general election from a totally different perspective from what you get from the mainstream media. We'll be talking about the candidates who are taking on Labour and the Tories and pushing them all the way. So please subscribe and get updates. I'm really pleased to be joined on Not the Andrew Marr Show by Jody McIntyre, who is standing in Birmingham Yardley in the general election, and he's standing, obviously, that's Jess Phillips' seat. How are you doing, Jody?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me on.
The results in the local elections were quite positive, weren't they? I mean, in your Birmingham Yardley constituency, the independent candidate who was standing for mayor beat Labour apparently by about 2%. So the signs are quite good. But can you tell us why you're standing in Birmingham Yardley? What made you put yourself forward for this?
So I think not only in Birmingham, but across Britain, there are millions of people who are sick and tired of the monotony of the two-party system that we have now. And of course, you could say the gap between those two parties is becoming smaller and smaller. Now, undoubtedly, for many, the final straw or the nail in the coffin, the last nail in the coffin, if you like, was the Labour Party's, I would say, criminal reaction to the massacre still taking place 7 months later now in Gaza. The leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, went on national radio and said that the Israeli state had the right to cut off power and water to the entire population of Gaza. And there were many millions of people who will never ever forget that statement. Now, I've actually lived in Gaza myself in 2009, so 15 years ago now. And I remember that even then, there was only a certain number of hours of electricity per day. So you get a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the evening, for example. But it was, it was different from day to day and from week to week. So to hear that statement actually disgusts me on a personal level because I've lived with families in Gaza and I know what it's like to not have electricity. And for someone who apparently has a past as a human rights lawyer, this was the most disgusting and outrageous statement he could have made. But the implications were very severe because what he was essentially doing was giving a green light to a war crime, to a crime against humanity. And the people that had to pay for his position were the civilians of Gaza, 40,000 of whom have now lost their lives to the Israeli bombardment and to the Israeli assault on Gaza. But we hope that the Labour Party will also have to pay a certain price for this position. For many decades, they have taken the votes of certain communities for granted. They have seen certain seats as what they call safe seats, safe Labour seats. We think that that's going to change this year in this upcoming election. But I have to say that this movement that perhaps you can say has been spurred or launched by the horrific images coming out of Gaza is very much not a one-issue movement. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have abandoned so many people in our society. They've made so many U-turns, dropped so many promises and pledges that it's got to the point where we can't trust a single word this man says. And these are the people that I want to stand up for and speak up for and give a voice to. I want to give a voice to the disabled people in our society who have been condemned by the Conservatives and abandoned by Labour. I want to give a voice to the working people in Britain who have been condemned by the Conservatives and abandoned by Labour. I want to give a voice to the single mothers, the single parents who have been condemned by the Conservatives and abandoned by Labour. I want to give a voice to all those who are struggling to get by and have been completely let down by the two parties of the establishment.
And I mean, just to go back a bit on this, I mean, so was the decision of Starmer to speak in support of Israel cutting off electricity and water, was that the moment when you thought, I've got to stand, or were you planning on standing before anyway?
You know, the Palestinian issue has, as I mentioned, has always been very, very close to my heart for a long time, for many years. But there's one thing that has changed in the political system. We saw the victory of George Galloway in Rochdale, and what that proved was that there is a realistic chance of pro-Palestinian candidates winning against Labour and against the Conservatives. This is a very important point because I think for many, many years, there are hundreds of thousands of people who perhaps disagree with most or all of what the Labour Party now stand for, yet they vote for them out of fear of letting in the Conservatives. Now, I oppose the Conservatives wholeheartedly, but a party's political platform cannot simply be that we are not the Conservatives. And this scare tactic, this bullying tactic of if you don't vote for us, you're a Conservative enabler, is simply not going to work anymore. Not least because Keir Starmer is going out of his way to bring in the most right-wing elements of the Conservative Party into Labour. So it's actually the Labour Party who are enabling Conservatives to stay in power rather than the pro-Palestinian, pro-justice movement that we are trying to spearhead in this country.
Right. I mean, we've been following on the show every national demonstration since October and other protests that have been going on. But I feel that George Galloway's victory in Rochdale scared the establishment more than any of those demos or protests, because within a day, Rishi Sunak was outside Number 10 calling him all these, smearing him effectively, and they were in a lot of fear about a wave of politicians coming forward. So just about Jess Phillips. I mean, I don't want to make this a personal thing because you're standing on the principle of the Labour Party, but Jess Phillips is someone who, what was her voting record on Palestine and Gaza and especially on the ceasefire?
I think the key point is that up to this day, up to today, Jess Phillips is a member of Labour Friends of Israel. We don't want a friend of Israel as our representative in Birmingham Yardley. I travel around the constituency every day, and it is probably one of the most pro-Palestinian constituencies in the country. And this is amongst all communities, amongst Muslims, amongst Christians, amongst people of other faiths, amongst old people, young people, men and women, because the fact is, it's incredible that I have to even state this fact, but most people in Britain oppose genocide. That's a simple fact. Most of the British public do not like to see children being bombed with weapons often produced and exported from Britain. So this is a position we're taking, that any friend of Israel cannot be a friend of justice by its very definition. The Israeli state is currently accused of genocide at the International Court of Justice. So to be a friend of Israel after 7 months of a genocidal campaign is simply unacceptable. Furthermore, I would take the position that any person, any member of parliament who does believe in justice, who does believe in supporting the most vulnerable in our society, and is still in the Labour Party, needs to really consider their position, because there are large swathes of the country where Labour is becoming a toxic brand. Labour is becoming a toxic brand. The Conservatives have imposed the two-child benefit cap, which drives hundreds of thousands of children in Britain into poverty. Keir Starmer said he will keep that benefit cap. The Shadow Health Minister, Wes Streeting, said that he will keep the door open to private investment into the NHS. Whereas I believe that the majority of people in Britain do not want to see our NHS privatized. So this is the platform we're standing on.
We'd all love to support you and do what we can to make sure that there's a big shock up there in Birmingham Yardley. What can we do to help your campaign? Is there anything have you got a crowdfunder? Do you need money? What sort of things are you looking to get from people like us who want Labour out and the Tories out?
So I honestly believe we have the opportunity to achieve something historic in Birmingham Yardley, and we have the opportunity to give Keir Starmer the shock of his life. I'm going against parties that have millions of pounds behind them. So of course, I need people's financial support, and I have a crowdfunder that people can donate to online. I need volunteers above all. I need volunteers, anyone who lives in the nearby area and wants to support my campaign can contact me directly online and volunteer to be a part of the campaign. And I need everyone in Birmingham Yardley to vote for me, vote for Jody McIntyre, Jody for Yardley at the next general election, so that we can stand up together for disabled people, for the downtrodden, for those without a voice, and we can give them a voice.